obscenity and vulgarity of the rock and roll music is obviously a means by which the white man and his children can be driven to the level with the nigger. It is obviously nigger music.
Well, if you talk to the average teenager of today and you ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, and the first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
Rock and roll has got to go, and go it does.
To understand rock and roll, we must first recognize the history of black music in America. When Africans were violently taken from their homeland and forced into slavery, they were stripped of freedom and culture. Despite systematic attempts to erase their humanity, they preserved rhythms, songs, storytellings, and spiritual traditions. These cultural memories became the foundation of black musical expression. During enslavement, Africans and African Americans were forced to adopt new languages, religions, and social structures that dehumanized them. Yet they acculturated for survival. As William Marner notes, black musical life was never confined to a single style. African Americans incorporated European fiddle tunes, shape notes singing, as seen in blues and swing music, which grew out of work songs, field hollers, and spirituals sung by enslaved people in the South. During the Great Migration, black Americans moved from rural South to the northern cities, shifting blues from private to mainstream. The Harlem Renaissance, a black cultural evolution, aimed to elevate musical forms associated with folk elements, especially when they gained acceptance in the broader art world. Bartok elevated ritual folk traditions within Western art music, recognizing their cultural depth and their celebration, and was celebrated for it. In contrast, black musicians drawing on their own folk traditions to create jazz, rhythm and blues, and rock and roll were often marginalized, exposing the racial power structures that shaped whose innovations were celebrated or erased. The incorporation of European elements into jazz became more pronounced after the 1940s and World War II. Performers blended blues, hillbilly music, jazz, and gospel to produce rhythm and blues. Elements of black musical culture, which was less accepted in jazz, found a new expression in rhythm and blues. This genre served not only as dance music but also as a form of personal expression, fulfilling social functions that jazz had previously provided within the black community. Its rhythmic divide, backbeat, and blues progression would define early rock and roll. Rock and roll began as black popular music. The music was seen as part of the broader black freedom struggle, with artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard symbolizing a refusal to conform to racial and racist societal norms. These music resonated with youth and continued to change racial dynamics. This exploration in popularity, even in young white audiences, as new form of dance music led to its domination in broadcast sectors like television, enticing record labels to commercialize and appeal to both white and black audiences. The music industry, predominantly white-owned, began to market it explicitly to young white audiences. This shift led to the fading of the original black musical influence, as the focus moved towards artists who conformed to white expectations of sound. Mainly white artists, particularly from the South, drew inspiration from previous genres, which transformed their music and contributed to the excitement of rock and roll. Rock and roll was an imposed term popularized by disc jockey Alan Freed. It allowed a variety of musical styles that were popular in the 50s to be seen as one and marketed accordingly. It served the connection between this genre and earlier black music. The term rock and roll did not signify the racial origin of the singer in the way that rhythm and blues did. After Brown v. Board decision, Southern segregationists launched massive resistance that included attacks on black-inspired rock and roll. Many Northerners also viewed the music popular among working-class blacks and white youth as a threat to middle-class values and sexual mortality. Although social change, like integration and the change of racial dynamics, was influenced of white and black artists working together within one genre, it did not entirely solve the racial inequality in the music industry or the country. Many white artists gained fame by covering songs originally recorded by black musicians. This practice often led to white versions outselling the originals, raising issues of appropriation and exploitation of black music by white entrepreneurs. Eventually signed to major labels, Elvis Presley, Pat Boone, and lesser-known white artists attracted extensive media attention and benefited from new marketing techniques that only the major labels could afford. By the late 1960s, the visibility of black rock artists diminished. Manur Mon explains, like so many American institutions, the recording industry creates a separate and unequal place of African Americans. Black artists and executives work within a restricted range of creative possibilities, controlling fewer economic resources, and have limited decision-making power. Compared to their white counterparts, black artists face racially motivated patterns of discrimination that have shaped every aspect of the production and distribution of music black Americans have created since the 1920s to the present. Late 20th century movements like Fusionism and Totalism similarly drew on black musical innovations. Totalism composers such as John Adams, Julie Wolfe, and Mike Rouse built their aesthetic on rhythmic repetition, groove, polyrhythms, and amplified textures, heavily indebted to rock, funk, Motown, and African drumming. These parallels reveal how black musical languages continue to shape Western art even when the institutions celebrating these later composers remain far more willing to legitimize white experimenters than the black originators whose practice they draw upon. Borrowing and mixing are natural parts of musical evolution, but in rock and roll, white appropriation of black sound often harmed the genre's originators. Producers knew it was easier to market white artists to a segregated nation, and racial biases protected the industry's unfair business practices. Although black and white musicians influenced each other, racial hierarchy remained firmly in place. White performers received better access to contracts and opportunities, while black artists were restricted to inferior resources and limited control. Ultimately, greater visibility and industry support allowed white artists to dominate rock and roll. This pattern of black innovation and white profit has repeated throughout American music history and American history in general. Despite this, black artists have profoundly influenced the music industry by integrating social commentary into their music, challenging industry norms, and asserting their identity and freedom. To erase this aspect of music history is to erase the very people whose resilience made rock and roll possible.